All right, so for 10th edition list building, we are way more flexible than we've seen in the past. So there are some restrictions, but there's pretty few. The major restriction is that when you start building your list, instead of having a force org chart or slots or anything like that, they just start you out with requiring one character. And this is it just says character, which means there's no like HQ slot character versus elite character. It just says one character. As we get our codexes and data sheets, we may see that certain ones may have on the data sheet of this character can't be your mandatory slot or things like that. But it's pretty unrestricted. After that, you can take any data sheet, up to 3 of them, for your unit. So you can run every fast attack slot or data sheet that you have and run up to 3 of them, assuming you have the points, obviously, and never run any troops or heavies or anything like that if you don't want to. Now, the other caveat to this is that your dedicated transports and what they call battle line units, instead of being capped at 3, are capped at 6. Now, we don't have all the information on every codex, obviously, so we don't know who is all battle line. But it's pretty safe to say that pretty much all of the troops are going to be battle line. And then depending on the faction, you may get some additional exceptions. So one of the things that comes to mind is with World Eaters, maybe we see Berserkers become battle line, because that's not only a unique unit to that faction, but we've seen in previous editions how they allowed Berserkers to count as troops and things like that. So we'll find that out as we get a codex. The only other real list build restriction we have are things that they call enhancements. So this sounds like effectively relics or warlord traits or special abilities that we can give to them. Though they haven't clarified what the enhancements are, because that's going to be faction specific. You are capped at maximum 3 enhancements across your list. Each enhancement has to be unique, so you can't take the same one multiple times. And each character is going to be capped at 1 per character. So obviously, if you're only taking the 1 mandatory character, even though you could take up to 3 enhancements, you're really only going to be able to take 1. But with this edition, I don't imagine we're going to see people really wanting just 1 character, since their buffs are now attached to units instead of being auras way less often or at all in some cases.
So do you think that there's going to be less comboing relics and warlord traits on characters as a result?
Yes, for sure. We'll go over it in another video, but basically Warlord works very differently in the way you build your list and the way you play in this edition. On top of, it's not even a part of your, to put it easily, it's not a part of your list build. You don't select what your Warlord is during list build like you would in the past. You actually get to decide that when you are starting the game. So your list can have, let's say, 3 different characters with 3 different enhancements, and you can decide which one is your Warlord after you've seen your opponent. So you don't even have to decide ahead of time. So that kind of comboing is discouraged, not only your list building, but also discouraged when we're talking about your the play of the game, because the auras are now mostly buffing the unit that the character is attached to. So it's going to be way harder to kind of combo a bunch of characters onto 1 unit if that unit is only allowed to have 1 character in it to begin with. So yeah,
Right,
so I
that
think
makes
there's going to
sense.
be way less comboing.
Okay, my other question is, can you take empty dedicated transports?
No. So we'll also talk about that when we get to dedicated transports, but basically you can take a bunch of dedicated transports. However, when you go to deploy them on the field, even though they're in your list, there has to be a unit inside of them when they're deployed, or they can't be deployed. So where that gets a little weird is not only can you plan for that during your list, but let's say for some reason you're playing a game and after you see your opponent, you decide that you don't want the dedicated transport for whatever reason. This is a crazy idea and it's probably not what you do. Let's just say that situation actually happens. Well, if you decide to put the unit on the field instead of in the transport, and you get done deploying and the transport still doesn't have something in it, the transport never arrives on the field, even if that transport has guns and could act standalone, which is an interesting change to the way they're doing it in 10.
Cool, cool. Is there anything else you want to mention about list building?
There's a bunch of craziness, but I think for the most part, this is pretty solid about how to build your list. The other things that you're going to want to consider here, we're going to go over in additional videos when it comes to talking about reserves, strategic reserves, deploying, things like that.
Cool. All right, thank you.